My name is Vanessa Parker. I'm 35 years old, and I had just spent 6 months meticulously planning and personally funding my parents' 50th wedding anniversary celebration with $74,000 of my own money, coordinating with dozens of relatives and vendors to create the perfect golden anniversary party for Margaret and Donald Parker, only to arrive at the venue and be coldly told by my mother, "You're not welcome here. Go," while my father summoned security to remove me as an intruder from the celebration I had created entirely through my own planning and financial investment. What my parents didn't know was that their shocking betrayal and public humiliation of the daughter who had made their dream celebration possible was about to trigger the most spectacular collapse of their golden anniversary party, because every vendor, caterer, photographer, and vacation booking was in my name and under my financial control, and their cruelty was about to cost them everything I had so lovingly provided. The months of planning that would culminate in the most devastating family betrayal I could have ever imagined began in January when my parents casually mentioned during our weekly dinner that their 50th wedding anniversary was approaching in June, and they were hoping to have some kind of celebration to mark this significant milestone in their marriage and family history. "We'd love to do something special for our golden anniversary," my mother Margaret had said wistfully, "but we're just not sure we have the energy or resources to plan something meaningful at our age. These kinds of celebrations require so much coordination and expense that we're not sure we can manage it ourselves." My father Donald had nodded in agreement, adding his own concerns about the complexity and cost of organizing a proper anniversary celebration. 50 years of marriage deserves a real celebration, but the venues, catering, invitations, and all the coordination seems overwhelming when you're in your 70s. We'd hate for our golden anniversary to pass without proper recognition because we couldn't figure out how to make it happen. The combination of their obvious desire for a meaningful celebration and their practical concerns about planning and funding had immediately triggered my instinct to help. Because I loved my parents deeply and wanted their milestone anniversary to be everything they dreamed it could be, regardless of the time, effort, and money required to make their vision a reality. "Let me handle the entire celebration for you," I had offered enthusiastically, already beginning to envision the elegant party that would honor their 5 decades of marriage while bringing together family and friends who had been part of their journey. I have experience with event planning, and I'd be honored to create something beautiful and memorable for your 50th anniversary. My parents' response had been gratitude and relief, as they expressed appreciation for my willingness to take on the substantial task of coordinating a major family celebration while ensuring that every detail reflected their preferences and honored their relationship in appropriate ways. "Vanessa, that would be wonderful," Margaret had said, her voice filled with the kind of maternal pride and affection that made me even more committed to creating an extraordinary celebration. "You have such good taste and organizational skills. We know you'd plan something perfect for us and our guests." Donald had been equally appreciative, emphasizing how much my involvement would mean to them, and how confident they were that I would create exactly the kind of anniversary celebration they had been hoping for, but couldn't manage to plan themselves. "Having you coordinate our golden anniversary takes such a weight off our shoulders," Donald had added, "and we know that whatever you plan will be elegant and meaningful, because you understand what's important to us and what would make this milestone truly special." The trust and appreciation my parents had expressed during that initial conversation had motivated me to commit not just my time and planning skills, but also my financial resources to ensuring that their 50th anniversary celebration would exceed their expectations and create memories that would last for the rest of their lives. Over the following months, I had devoted countless hours to researching venues, interviewing caterers, selecting photographers, choosing floral arrangements, designing invitations, and coordinating with family members and friends who would be attending this once-in-a-lifetime celebration of my parents' marriage and commitment. The venue I selected was the historic Riverside Manor, an elegant event space with gardens and ballrooms that could accommodate the 150 guests we were expecting while providing the sophisticated atmosphere that my parents deserved for their golden anniversary celebration. "This venue is perfect for your parents' anniversary," the event coordinator had told me during our planning meeting. The garden ceremony space and grand ballroom will create exactly the kind of elegant celebration that honors 50 years of marriage while providing beautiful settings for photographs and memories. The catering package I arranged featured a 5-course gourmet dinner with wine pairings, cocktail hour appetizers, and an elaborate anniversary cake that would serve as the centerpiece for the evening's celebration, while ensuring that every guest experienced exceptional food and service throughout the event. The photography and videography services I contracted would document every moment of the celebration, creating professional keepsakes that would allow my parents to relive their anniversary party for years to come while preserving memories for future generations of our family. But perhaps the most significant aspect of my planning was the luxury cruise vacation I had booked for my parents as their anniversary gift, a 2-week Mediterranean cruise with first-class accommodations, excursions, and amenities that would allow them to celebrate their milestone privately while experiencing destinations they had always dreamed of visiting. This cruise package represents the ultimate romantic getaway for couples celebrating major anniversaries, the travel agent had explained when I made the booking. Your parents will experience luxury accommodations, gourmet dining, and guided tours of historic European cities while enjoying the kind of pampered vacation that makes milestone celebrations truly unforgettable. The total investment I made in my parents' 50th anniversary celebration was $74,000, representing money I had saved over several years, and was happy to spend to honor their marriage and show my love and appreciation for everything they had given me throughout my life. Every aspect of the celebration had been planned with care and attention to detail that reflected my deep love for my parents and my commitment to making their golden anniversary the most beautiful and memorable day possible, worthy of their 5 decades of marriage and partnership. The final weeks before the anniversary party were filled with last-minute coordination, confirming details with vendors, finalizing guest lists, and ensuring that every element of the celebration would proceed smoothly and create the magical experience that my parents deserved for this milestone moment. Everything is perfectly arranged for your parents' anniversary, the event coordinator had assured me during our final planning meeting. The venue, catering, flowers, music, and photography are all coordinated to create an elegant celebration that will exceed their expectations and create lasting memories for your entire family. Have you ever invested months of planning and tens of thousands of dollars to create a perfect celebration for people you love, believing that your generosity and dedication would be appreciated and celebrated? That's exactly what I had done, never imagining that my parents were about to deliver the most shocking betrayal possible on the very day I had worked so hard to make special for them. The golden anniversary celebration I had created with so much love and financial sacrifice was about to become the setting for a family betrayal that would change our relationships forever. The morning of my parents' golden anniversary celebration dawned with perfect weather and my excited anticipation about finally seeing 6 months of meticulous planning come together in the elegant party that would honor Margaret and Donald Parker's 50 years of marriage while bringing together family and friends for a truly memorable milestone celebration. I had spent the early morning hours making final preparations, reviewing my detailed timeline with vendors, confirming that all arrangements were proceeding smoothly, and getting dressed in the formal gown I had selected specifically for this special family occasion that represented the culmination of my efforts to create something beautiful and meaningful. The drive to Riverside Manor was filled with satisfaction and nervous excitement, as I anticipated seeing my parents' reactions to the elaborate celebration I had planned and funded entirely through my own dedication and financial investment. Confident that every detail would reflect the love and respect I felt for their marriage and their role in my life. But as I approached the venue entrance where elegantly dressed guests were arriving for the celebration, I noticed something unexpected that immediately created a feeling of unease and confusion about what was happening at the event I had spent so much time and money creating. The security personnel stationed at the venue entrance were checking names against what appeared to be an exclusion list, turning away several people who had expected to attend the anniversary celebration, creating an atmosphere of tension and confusion that seemed completely inconsistent with the joyous family gathering I had envisioned. "Excuse me," I said to the security guard as I approached the entrance with my invitation and identification. "I'm Vanessa Parker, the daughter of the anniversary couple and the person who organized this entire celebration. There seems to be some confusion about guest access." The security guard's response was immediate and shocking as he consulted his list and then looked at me with the professional detachment of someone delivering unwelcome news that he had been specifically instructed to communicate. "Ma'am, you're on the exclusion list," the security guard said matter-of-factly. "I have explicit instructions that you are not permitted to enter this venue or attend this celebration. You'll need to leave the property immediately." The words hit me with such devastating force that I initially couldn't process what I was hearing, because the idea that I would be excluded from the celebration I had personally planned and funded was so incomprehensible that my mind struggled to accept the reality of what was happening. "There must be some mistake," I said, showing the guard my planning documents and vendor contracts. "I organized this entire celebration. I paid for the venue, the catering, the photography, everything. How can I be excluded from an event that I created?" But before the security guard could respond, my mother Margaret appeared at the venue entrance, her expression cold and determined, as she delivered the most heartbreaking rejection I had ever experienced from someone who was supposed to love me unconditionally. "There's no mistake, Vanessa," Margaret said with chilling finality. "You're not welcome here. Go." The coldness in my mother's voice and the complete absence of any affection or explanation was so shocking that I stood frozen, unable to comprehend how the person I had spent 6 months planning this celebration for could be treating me with such cruelty on the day I had worked so hard to make perfect for her. "Mom, I don't understand," I said, my voice shaking with confusion and growing devastation. "I planned this entire party for you and Dad. I spent months coordinating every detail and paid for everything. Why are you excluding me from your anniversary celebration?" Margaret's response was even more brutal than her initial rejection, revealing a level of callousness that destroyed any remaining hope I had that this was some kind of misunderstanding that could be resolved through explanation or appeals to our family relationship. "We don't owe you any explanations," Margaret replied with icy contempt. "You're not wanted here, and if you don't leave voluntarily, security will remove you from the premises." The realization that my mother was not just excluding me, but actively threatening to have me physically removed from the celebration I had created was so devastating that I felt my legs weaken and my vision blur as the magnitude of this betrayal began to register in my consciousness. At that moment, my father, Donald, appeared beside Margaret, and for a brief instant, I hoped he might provide some explanation or intervene on my behalf. But his words completed the destruction of everything I had believed about my place in my parents' lives, and their appreciation for my love and sacrifice. "Security, remove this intruder from our anniversary celebration," Donald said with authority and disgust, as if I were a stranger causing problems rather than the daughter who had made their dream celebration possible through months of planning and $74,000 of personal financial investment. The word intruder cut through me like a knife, because it revealed that my parents didn't just want me to leave. They wanted me to be treated as if I had no legitimate connection to the celebration, or any right to be present at an event that existed entirely because of my love, effort, and financial commitment. "Please don't do this," I pleaded, making one final attempt to reach whatever parental love might still exist beneath their cruel rejection. "I created this celebration because I love you and wanted to honor your marriage. How can you exclude me from something I made possible?" But my parents' response was to signal to security that they should proceed with removing me from the premises, making it clear that no amount of reasoning, pleading, or reference to my role in creating the celebration would change their decision to exclude me from the anniversary party I had funded. As security personnel approached me with the obvious intention of escorting me away from the venue, I looked around desperately for family members or friends who might intervene on my behalf, or at least express some concern about what was happening to me. Instead, I saw dozens of relatives and family friends who were clearly aware of my planned exclusion and had chosen to proceed with attending the celebration I had funded while supporting my parents' decision to ban me from experiencing the joy and recognition that should have accompanied my generous gift. Have you ever realized that your entire extended family had conspired to exclude you from a celebration you created and funded, while they enjoyed your generosity without any concern for your feelings or well-being? That's exactly what I was experiencing as I saw familiar faces deliberately avoiding eye contact while security prepared to remove me from my own event. The humiliation was complete, but my parents had made a crucial mistake in their betrayal. They had excluded the one person who had the power to destroy everything they were about to enjoy. The devastating realization that my entire extended family had been aware of my planned exclusion, while allowing me to continue funding and planning the celebration, created a level of betrayal that extended far beyond just my parents' cruelty to include aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends, who had knowingly participated in the conspiracy to take my generosity while rejecting my presence. As security personnel took my arms to escort me from the venue, I could see relatives and family friends who had spoken with me about the anniversary celebration during the planning process. People who had known about the elaborate party I was creating and had expressed excitement about attending, now deliberately avoiding my gaze while proceeding into the venue to enjoy the fruits of my labor. My Aunt Carol, who had called me just 2 weeks earlier to discuss her excitement about the anniversary party and to compliment me on my planning efforts, walked past me without acknowledgement while I was being removed from the celebration I had created, her silence revealing that she had been fully informed about my planned exclusion. My Uncle Richard and his family, who had specifically requested dietary accommodations that I had arranged with the caterers at additional expense, entered the venue while watching security escort me away, their lack of surprise or concern making it obvious that they had advanced knowledge of my parents' intention to exclude me after using my services. Even family friends who had expressed gratitude for my invitation and praised my dedication to creating a meaningful celebration for my parents were now treating me as if I were a stranger causing disruption, rather than the person whose generosity had made their enjoyable evening possible. The coordinated nature of their indifference and the complete absence of any surprise about my exclusion made it clear that my parents had not only planned my rejection, but had also enlisted the entire guest list in their conspiracy, ensuring that no one would question my absence or intervene on my behalf when I was removed from the celebration. "Mrs. Parker asked us to escort you to your vehicle," the security guard said with professional politeness, as if removing someone from their own event was a routine procedure rather than the culmination of an elaborate betrayal that had required months of coordination and family-wide conspiracy. The walk to my car while 150 guests watched my humiliation was the longest journey of my life, as I processed the magnitude of what my family had done to me, and began to understand that their cruelty extended beyond just excluding me to include the deliberate psychological torture of allowing me to plan and fund the celebration while knowing they intended to prevent me from experiencing any joy or recognition for my sacrifice. As I reached my car and security ensured that I left the venue property, I could hear the sounds of the celebration beginning inside. Music, laughter, and conversation that represented the activation of everything I had planned and funded, while being excluded from experiencing any of the happiness I had made possible for others. The initial shock and devastation of being rejected by my parents was beginning to transform into something else entirely, as I sat in my car processing what had just happened and realizing that my exclusion from the celebration created opportunities for response that my parents had not anticipated or prepared for. The key realization that would transform my devastation into decisive action was understanding that while my parents had succeeded in excluding me from attending the celebration, they had not actually gained control over the celebration itself, because every vendor, every service, and every arrangement was contracted and paid for under my name and authority. Margaret and Donald Parker were not the customers of record for any aspect of their anniversary celebration. I was the client who had hired the venue, the caterers, the photographers, the florists, and every other vendor who was currently providing services for the elaborate party they were enjoying. More importantly, the payments for these services were being processed through my credit cards and bank accounts, giving me immediate power to reverse transactions and cancel arrangements that my parents had apparently assumed would continue regardless of how they treated the person who had made them possible. The cruise vacation I had booked as their anniversary gift was refundable within 24 hours of the celebration date, meaning that their luxury Mediterranean getaway could be canceled and refunded to my account before they even knew it had been taken away from them. As I sat in my car outside the venue where my parents were beginning to enjoy the celebration I had created, I pulled out my phone and began making the calls that would teach them about the consequences of excluding someone from joy they had created through love and financial sacrifice. The first call was to my credit card company, where I explained that I needed to dispute and reverse charges for services that were being provided to people who had explicitly rejected my presence and participation in the event I had funded. I need to reverse all charges related to an anniversary celebration, I told the customer service representative. The beneficiaries of these services have excluded me from the event and are treating me as an intruder, so I want to cancel my financial responsibility for their celebration. The customer service process was surprisingly straightforward, as the representative explained that I had the right to dispute charges for services where I was being denied access, or where the circumstances of service provision had changed substantially from what I had originally contracted and paid for. Have you ever discovered that being excluded from your own generosity gave you the power to revoke that generosity in real time? That's exactly what I was experiencing as I began the process of systematically canceling every aspect of the celebration that my parents thought they could enjoy while rejecting the person who had made it possible. The elegant golden anniversary celebration that was just beginning inside the venue was about to experience some very sudden and dramatic changes that would teach my parents about the practical consequences of their emotional cruelty. My systematic cancellation of every aspect of the anniversary celebration began with reversing the credit card payments that were funding the elaborate party my parents were currently enjoying, while believing they had successfully excluded me from benefits that were entirely dependent on my continued financial authorization and goodwill. The credit card representative explained that disputed charges for event services could be reversed immediately when the cardholder was being denied access to events they had personally funded, creating a situation where my parents' celebration would lose its financial foundation while they were still inside the venue enjoying appetizers and cocktails. We've initiated immediate reversals for all the charges you've disputed, the representative confirmed. The merchants will be notified within minutes that payment authorization has been revoked, and they'll need to seek alternative payment arrangements if they want to continue providing services. The next call was to the venue coordinator at Riverside Manor, who needed to be informed that the celebration currently taking place in their facility was about to lose its funding source, and that continuing service would require immediate payment arrangements from the anniversary couple themselves. This is Vanessa Parker, the client who booked the anniversary celebration currently taking place at your venue, I explained to the coordinator. I need to inform you that I've canceled payment authorization for this event, and any continuing service will require immediate payment from the guests of honor. The venue coordinator's response revealed that this was an unusual but not unprecedented situation, as they had procedures for handling events where payment disputes arose during celebrations, though she seemed surprised that the dispute was coming from the person who had organized the entire anniversary party. Ms. Parker, we'll need to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Parker immediately about payment arrangements if they want the celebration to continue, the coordinator explained. Without confirmed payment, we'll need to begin shutting down services and asking guests to leave the premises. The call to the catering company produced similar results, as I explained that I was revoking payment authorization for the 5-course dinner and cocktail service that was currently being provided to 150 guests who were enjoying food and beverages that would no longer be funded by the person they had excluded from the celebration. We'll need to pack up the remaining food service and require immediate payment from the event hosts if they want dinner to proceed as planned, the caterer informed me after I canceled their payment authorization. This will create significant disruption to the celebration, but we can't continue providing services without confirmed payment. The photography and videography services were equally easy to cancel, as I explained to the professionals who were currently documenting the anniversary celebration that their services were no longer authorized or funded by the person who had contracted their work. We'll stop recording immediately and pack up our equipment, the photographer confirmed after learning that payment had been revoked. The celebration documentation will end at this point unless the anniversary couple arranges alternative payment for our continued services. But perhaps the most satisfying cancellation was the luxury Mediterranean cruise vacation I had booked as my parents' anniversary gift, which could be canceled with full refund as long as the cancellation occurred within 24 hours of the celebration date. The cruise package for Mr. and Mrs. Parker has been canceled with full refund, the travel agent confirmed. The $18,000 vacation package will be returned to your account within 24 hours, and the anniversary couple will need to make alternative arrangements for their planned getaway. Each cancellation I made was both emotionally satisfying and practically devastating to the celebration my parents thought they could enjoy, while excluding the person who had made everything possible through months of planning and substantial financial investment. The systematic elimination of venue services, catering, photography, flowers, music, and vacation packages was creating a situation where my parents' golden anniversary celebration would transform from an elegant party into a crisis situation, requiring immediate financial solutions that they had not prepared for or budgeted for. As I completed the final cancellation calls, I could imagine the confusion and growing panic that would soon begin inside the venue as vendors started receiving payment reversals and began the process of shutting down services that were no longer financially authorized or supported. The timing of my cancellations was particularly effective because the celebration was in its early stages, with guests having just arrived and begun enjoying cocktails and appetizers, meaning that the shutdown of services would occur while everyone was present to witness the collapse of the elaborate party they had expected to enjoy. Within 30 minutes of my first cancellation call, vendors throughout the venue would be receiving notifications that their payment authorization had been revoked and that they needed to seek immediate alternative payment or begin packing up their services and equipment. The catering staff would stop serving food and beverages while seeking management approval to continue or instructions to clean up and depart, creating obvious disruption that would be impossible for guests to ignore or explain away. The venue coordinator would approach my parents to inform them that their celebration was losing its financial foundation and that immediate payment arrangements were required to prevent the shutdown of their anniversary party in front of 150 family members and friends. The photographers would pack up their equipment and stop documenting the celebration, eliminating any professional recording of the milestone anniversary that my parents had wanted to preserve for posterity and family memories. But most importantly, my parents would discover that their luxury vacation had been canceled along with their celebration, eliminating both their anniversary party and their planned getaway, while leaving them responsible for finding alternative arrangements on short notice. The total financial impact of my cancellations was $74,000 that would be returned to my accounts, instead of funding the ungrateful celebration of people who had excluded me from joy I had created through love and sacrifice. Have you ever had the power to systematically dismantle something you created for people who rejected your presence while enjoying your generosity? The satisfaction of watching entitled people lose benefits they never deserved is exceeded only by the justice of keeping resources they had taken for granted. The elegant anniversary celebration that had begun with such promise was about to transform into chaos, as my parents learned that excluding someone from their own generosity creates immediate and devastating consequences for people who mistake kindness for obligation. The collapse of my parents' golden anniversary celebration began approximately 45 minutes after my systematic cancellation of all services and payment authorizations, as vendors throughout Riverside Manor started receiving notification that their financial authorization had been revoked, and they needed to seek immediate alternative payment or begin shutting down the elaborate party that 150 guests were currently enjoying. The first visible sign of disruption occurred when the catering staff stopped serving cocktails and appetizers while managers consulted with the venue coordinator about the payment crisis that was developing in real time during what had been planned as an elegant celebration of 50 years of marriage. I remained in my car in the venue parking lot, watching through the windows as confusion began to spread among guests who were noticing that service had become inconsistent and that staff members were having urgent conversations rather than focusing on providing the seamless hospitality that had characterized the early part of the celebration. The venue coordinator's approach to my parents was visible even from the parking lot, as I could see her gesturing with obvious concern while explaining the payment crisis that was threatening to shut down their anniversary party unless they could provide immediate financial authorization for continuing services. My parents' reaction was initially confusion, followed by what appeared to be growing panic as they realized that their celebration was losing its financial foundation and that they were suddenly responsible for costs they had never budgeted for or prepared to handle on short notice. The catering manager joined the conversation with my parents, apparently explaining that food service would need to stop unless immediate payment arrangements could be made for the 5-course dinner and continued beverage service that had been contracted and was currently being provided to their guests. Within minutes, other vendors began approaching my parents with similar payment demands, as the photographer packed up equipment while seeking authorization to continue documenting the celebration, and the florist began collecting centerpieces and decorative arrangements that were no longer financially supported. The growing crisis was becoming obvious to guests as well, who began noticing that services were shutting down around them, while staff members removed equipment and decorations that had created the elegant atmosphere for the anniversary celebration. My phone, which had been silent during the period when I was making cancellation calls, suddenly began ringing with desperate calls from family members who were witnessing the collapse of the celebration and were trying to understand what was happening to the elaborate party they had been enjoying. The first call was from my Aunt Carol, whose voice was filled with panic and confusion as she tried to comprehend why the anniversary celebration was falling apart around the guests who had gathered to honor my parents' milestone marriage. "Vanessa, something terrible is happening at the anniversary party," Carol said frantically. "Vendors are packing up equipment and demanding immediate payment from your parents. The catering staff says they can't continue serving dinner without payment authorization. What's going on?" "What's going on is that Mom and Dad excluded me from the celebration I planned and funded," I replied calmly. "So I canceled all the arrangements and payment authorizations. They wanted to enjoy my generosity without my presence. But apparently that's not how vendor contracts work." The silence that followed my explanation was profound, as Carol processed the reality that the celebration's collapse was directly connected to my parents' decision to exclude me from the anniversary party I had created through months of planning and substantial financial investment. "But there are 150 guests here expecting an elegant dinner and celebration," Carol protested, apparently more concerned about the social embarrassment than about the injustice that had precipitated the crisis. "You can't just destroy the party because of a misunderstanding with your parents." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I replied, enjoying the clarity that came with finally stating the truth about what had happened. "They deliberately excluded me after taking my money and planning. They called me an intruder and had security remove me from the celebration I created. Now they get to experience what their anniversary looks like without my support." More calls began flooding my phone as other family members discovered that the celebration was collapsing and that I was responsible for the systematic cancellation of services that were leaving my parents scrambling to fund their own anniversary party. My Uncle Richard called with a mixture of anger and desperation, demanding that I restore the celebration services and stop ruining what should have been a beautiful family milestone, apparently believing that I owed continued financial support to people who had rejected and humiliated me. "Vanessa, you need to fix this situation immediately," Richard demanded. Your parents' anniversary celebration is falling apart, and 150 guests are watching this disaster unfold. You can't let a family disagreement destroy such an important milestone. I didn't destroy anything, I corrected. I simply stopped funding a celebration that I was excluded from attending. My parents wanted their anniversary party without me, so now they can have it without my money as well. They're free to pay for their own celebration if they want it to continue. The growing number of calls from family members revealed that the situation inside the venue was becoming increasingly chaotic as vendors continued shutting down services while my parents struggled to arrange immediate payment for costs they had never anticipated having to cover themselves. But perhaps the most satisfying call came from Michelle, a family friend who had been helping coordinate guest arrangements and who was witnessing firsthand the collapse of what she had expected to be an elegant and well-organized anniversary celebration. The venue coordinator is telling everyone that the celebration is being shut down due to payment disputes, Michelle reported. Your parents are trying to use their credit cards to pay for continuing service, but the costs are enormous, and they don't have authorization for the full amount that's needed. Whoa, how much are the venue and catering companies demanding for immediate payment? I asked, curious about whether my parents could actually afford to continue the celebration they had assumed would be permanently funded by the daughter they had excluded. Over $40,000 for the remaining venue rental, dinner service, and vendor fees, Michelle replied. And that doesn't include the photography, flowers, and other services that are also demanding immediate payment, or they'll pack up and leave. The realization that my parents would need to spend more than $40,000 immediately to continue their anniversary celebration was particularly satisfying because it meant that their decision to exclude me was going to cost them far more than they had ever anticipated when they planned their cruel rejection. But the ultimate confirmation that my parents' anniversary celebration was truly collapsing came when my cousin Jennifer called to report that guests were beginning to leave the venue as services continued shutting down around them. People are starting to go home because there's no dinner service, and the venue is asking everyone to leave unless immediate payment can be arranged, Jennifer reported. Your parents are standing in the lobby trying to figure out how to pay for continuing the celebration, but it looks like the party is over. Have you ever created such perfect justice that the people who betrayed you were forced to watch their celebration collapse while all their guests witnessed their humiliation? That's exactly what was happening as my parents learned that excluding someone from their own generosity creates immediate and devastating consequences. The golden anniversary celebration that had begun with such elegance was ending in chaos and financial crisis, teaching my parents that kindness withdrawn is often more powerful than kindness given. The complete collapse of my parents' golden anniversary celebration was confirmed through a series of increasingly desperate phone calls as family members reported that the elegant party had transformed into a chaotic crisis where guests were leaving, vendors were packing up equipment, and my parents were facing the humiliating reality that they could not afford to continue the celebration they had assumed would be permanently funded by the daughter they had excluded. My cousin David called with an update that was both devastating for my parents and deeply satisfying for my sense of justice, as he described the scene inside Riverside Manor where the anniversary celebration was ending in exactly the kind of public embarrassment that my parents' cruelty had deserved. The venue coordinator just announced that the celebration is officially over, David reported, his voice mixing shock with obvious embarrassment about being associated with such a spectacular family disaster. They're asking all guests to leave immediately because your parents can't arrange payment for continuing any services. What about the dinner that was supposed to be served? I asked, enjoying the details of how my cancellations were affecting the elaborate meal I had planned and the guests who had expected to enjoy the 5-course gourmet experience. The catering staff packed up all the food and left about 20 minutes ago, David continued. Guests who were expecting an elegant dinner are being asked to leave hungry because there's no payment authorization for the meal service. People are confused and embarrassed about what's happening. The image of 150 formally dressed guests being asked to leave a celebration without dinner because the host couldn't afford to pay for the meal was exactly the kind of justice that my parents' betrayal had earned. as their cruelty toward me had created consequences that extended to everyone who had supported their decision to exclude me. But perhaps the most humiliating aspect of the celebration's collapse was that it was happening in front of the entire extended family and social circle that had witnessed my exclusion and had chosen to attend the party while supporting my parents' rejection of the person who had made their celebration possible. "How are Mom and Dad handling the situation?" I asked, curious about whether my parents were taking responsibility for the crisis they had created or were attempting to blame others for the consequences of their own cruel choices. "They're trying to convince people that this is all your fault," David replied. "But most guests saw you being excluded from the celebration you organized, so they understand that you're responding to being treated badly rather than creating problems out of nowhere." The revelation that my parents were attempting to blame me for the collapse of their anniversary celebration, while guests had witnessed their cruel exclusion of the person who had funded their party, was both predictable and pathetic, demonstrating their continued inability to accept responsibility for the consequences of their own actions. My Aunt Patricia called with additional details about the aftermath of the celebration's collapse, including information about the financial impact on my parents and the social embarrassment they were experiencing as their anniversary milestone ended in public disaster. "Your parents are going to have to pay the venue's cancellation fees and cleanup costs," Patricia reported. "Plus, they're responsible for the wasted food and the staff time that was invested in setting up services that couldn't be completed. The financial hit is going to be substantial." "How substantial are we talking about?" I asked, interested in understanding the full cost of my parents' decision to exclude me from the celebration I had created through love and financial sacrifice. The venue coordinator mentioned that cancellation penalties and cleanup costs could reach $15,000, Patricia continued, and that's on top of the embarrassment of having their anniversary celebration end with guests leaving hungry and confused about what happened. The combination of financial penalties and social humiliation was creating exactly the kind of comprehensive consequences that my parents' betrayal had deserved, as their cruelty toward me had generated costs that extended far beyond just losing the celebration I had funded. But the most satisfying confirmation that my parents were experiencing appropriate consequences came when my Uncle Robert called to report that the luxury cruise vacation had also been successfully canceled, eliminating both their anniversary celebration and their planned romantic getaway. "Your parents just discovered that their cruise vacation has been canceled," Robert reported. "They were planning to leave for the Mediterranean tomorrow, but the travel agency says the booking was canceled and refunded to the person who made the reservation." The realization that my parents had lost both their anniversary party and their vacation created a situation where their cruel exclusion of me had eliminated every aspect of the milestone celebration they had been anticipating, leaving them with nothing but embarrassment and unexpected expenses. "They're asking if there's any way to restore the cruise booking," Robert continued. "But the travel agent says the cancellation is final and the refund has already been processed. They'll need to make completely new arrangements if they want to take any kind of anniversary trip." The systematic elimination of both their celebration and their vacation meant that my parents' 50th anniversary had been transformed from a joyous milestone into a financial and social disaster that would be remembered for their cruelty rather than their marital achievement. Over the following hours, I received a total of 42 missed calls from various family members who were trying to convince me to restore some or all of the anniversary arrangements, apparently believing that my parents' public humiliation had been sufficient punishment and that family harmony required me to resume funding their celebration. But my response to these appeals was consistent and final. My parents had made their choice when they excluded me from the celebration I had created, and I had made mine by withdrawing the financial support that had made their party possible. The $74,000 that I recovered through canceling their anniversary celebration and vacation was returned to my accounts within 48 hours, representing not just the recovery of my financial investment, but also my liberation from family members who had viewed my generosity as an obligation rather than a gift. 6 months after my parents' failed anniversary celebration, I used the recovered money to fund my own dreams and goals, including a down payment on a beautiful home and a luxury vacation, that I enjoyed without anyone who would treat my presence as optional while demanding my financial support. The permanent estrangement that resulted from my parents' betrayal was both painful and liberating, because it freed me from relationships that had been built on my sacrifice for people who valued my contributions while rejecting my person. Have you ever discovered that withdrawing your generosity from people who took it for granted was more satisfying than any gift you had ever given them? Sometimes the most powerful response to ingratitude is allowing people to experience life without the support they had assumed would always be available. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Remember that those who exclude you from joy you created deserve to lose both your presence and your support. See you in our next story here on Her Sweet Revenge.